Three. Welcome to Entrepreneurs, Business, and Finance, the podcast. And we are fortunate to have Gary Burrows on the show today. He is a young retired person. So that alone shows he's had a level of success in his life. And he's also a terrific guy, a friend of mine. And he's able to go skiing 4 times a year if he wants and live the life that a lot of people dream of. But I'm sure that hasn't come without some work and some challenges. So we're going to ask some questions about how he started out and how he developed his career and also how he handled his investments. And then finally, kind of wrap up on a very interesting segment about how his family helped our country historically. So, Gary, do you want to tell us how you were able to uh, learn to become an expert in high tech and computers and how you
That's
got your first job?
well. That goes back quite a long way.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I was sort of a theory person studying mathematics, and had really thought about going into education, but various things led me to some people who were out in the workforce and working at different places, and so I threw my resume and stuff out there, and was got intrigued by it. And so I, not knowing what I really wanted to do, I just accepted every job that came my way. And then whether they started on the same day, and then made my final decision. But ended up doing something in a what would be now called, it's called system engineering, data analysis, data science, applied to the telecom network. But back, if you were to call that high tech back then, people nowadays would wonder what you're talking about because it was ancient. I go back a long way. So it was a lot of optimization theory, a lot of applied mathematics. And that, I always loved mathematics, and that route in my career in mathematics led me to a lot of other places in the topics that you discussed. But I started my career in a rather theoretical type environment at a company that doesn't exist anymore called Bell Northern Research. But you meet a lot of people of different backgrounds, and many of them applied their mathematics to the investment, their investments. This is how I learned and became familiar with applying my mathematics. Some of it I already knew from just studying mathematics, but the actual application, I didn't. So I guess networking had a lot to do with it. Networking with people that of different backgrounds, and they're doing some things, and you learn some things from them. But I did that particular aspect of my career for 10 years, and the things that I learned from there, mainly the how to apply mathematics to real world instead of theory, as well as the discipline to continue to do it. Now that's probably the most important lesson learned. So the other
We
significant thing,
Yeah,
yes,
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, no,
is
continue.
that we had worked in this uh, applied mathematics group or system engineering group for quite a while. I mean, I was in it for 10 years, and one day, I mean, we were paid fairly well, but not I would say great. One day, my other colleague and I were wandering around where the business unit was in the tower, we called it, and we noticed that everybody over there lived better. And by better, I mean they had better offices, they had lunch brought in, they drove better cars, and so we decided that maybe it was time that we got into the business unit. And so we each built a strategy, and that ended my what I thought would be my my career in the applied mathematics aspect of things, but it wasn't, and that just led me to more using it more in the investment world, which I can get to. So that's kind of my short story on where I started my career in a basically a theoretical applying my mathematics to designing telecom networks and circuit switch networks and transmission lines and Q models and all kinds of things. But when I got into the business world, I found a whole new application for the mathematics on all kinds of things, and more precisely in the investment world. And that's probably where I started seriously taking any money in my 401k, rolling it into a self-directed IRA, and doing everything myself. And once you learn,
yeah, I find that very interesting because what I understand is that most people in a 401k, they may go to a financial advisor, and that financial advisor may pick certain businesses that he thinks are growth or she thinks are growth, and that diversify and hold it for the long term. And you were actually actively picking individual stocks, doing options, trading, and not at all putting your money in. Even if some people do that themselves where they diversify, but you weren't doing any of that. You're more like what I picture of a guy in Wall Street, doing picking making deals all day long, but you're doing that for yourself in addition to your job.
yeah,
Um,
the because if you're unwilling or you don't have time, or you just, it overwhelms you to do the research yourself and learn about the company, then maybe you're better off just sticking it into a some kind of mutual fund. But it's not like impossible. And you focus with companies that are around you that you're intersecting with. See, in telecom, I had exposure to a lot of different companies because they're all our suppliers. So I learn about these people, what they do. You meet a lot of people in your travels. Once I was in the business unit and I was in the marketing research, and then I learned a lot about various companies in the tech world. Your usual suspects that build the chips and the memory and all kinds of things. So you learn, and one of the things that's kind of you have to learn is you have to learn what most people refer to as a value chain, and that's if you look at that company and all of the players around it, how do they make money? Who makes money in that chain? The end user might be at the bottom, and they give money to get a service, and that company provides them a service. But to do that, that company has to buy this from this company and this from this company. And so everybody in there is making money off of this product and service down to the end user. And you need to look at the various players and understand if this is viable and who's going to make the money. And you can pick your winners and losers. Well, that's just the part of understanding which companies you want to look at, and try not to do too many. And if you're just one person, you're not going to be able to manage a portfolio of 100 stocks and do all the research and keep it where you want it. I mean, that's for teams of people that have a lot more resources, but you don't have to if you're doing your research and you're picking some of the good ones. It shouldn't be impossible. So that's kind of what led me to just to do all my own investing. And this stage, it's almost on autopilot because I've already picked a handful of ones I follow and work with. But it takes a fair amount of discipline in the beginning because you're not going to always watch your portfolio go up, and you have to know when to cut your losses. People say that, oh no, it's down, but I'll wait, it'll go back up. But while you're waiting for it to go back up, another one may be going back up. And so you hung on to this one and you missed an opportunity somewhere else. So You have to have the discipline to cut your losses too. So,
And I know that you, because you shared, you also traveled the world, and did a lot of presentations to large groups, and that must have been a big shift from doing
yeah,
research and behind the desk to going way out in front of a lot of people. A lot of people that are, I don't want to count anyone short, but if you're going to profile people, you think someone that is really good at math and analyst might not be as good, you know, creating interest in front of a large crowd. Um,
well,
we're obviously good at
I,
both.
in a lot of my graduate work, well, I taught. I taught classes, so it wasn't. I was never uncomfortable in front of crowds. I was in the thespian when I was in high school. We did speech and drama tournaments, so I was never uneasy about being in front of a group of people speaking. And I guess they could tell that in the places where I worked, and so I did a lot of presentations in a lot of places for large audiences in out of 25 countries or more. Uh, in the early days of wireless, we were everywhere talking about it. So it's if you practice what you're going to deliver, there's no reason to be nervous. Most of the people in that audience, they don't know you, and they're never going to see you again. So there's no reason to be nervous about it.
Well, that's a very logical way of putting it. Uh, you actually didn't ask you about your degree. So, what was your schooling? Where did you go? And
I have undergraduates in geophysics and a master's in mathematics.
terrific.
And,
And when you were towards the end of your career, what were you doing then? Like we learned more about
I
the
Well, after the system engineering, and I got into market research, which actually bundled into consumer research. So I did a lot of um, studying what the consumer likes and what they're willing to buy and what they're willing to pay for. So it's a lot of combining um, understanding of the market and the consumer with data science, what they would call data science now. Some of them are you do surveys. What everybody believes a survey is. You send out a link and a bunch of questions on it, but the questions are very cleverly designed, and there are different ways to design questions that will allow you to get information. One of the really nice ones I really liked was like I call it the simulated shopping. That's the best way to describe it. There's other more technical words for it. But you give them like four different product options with different features and different prices, and you ask them, if you're going to buy one, which one would you buy? And you vary different things about the product, and you collect a bunch of information. You do some statistical analysis, and you figure out, well, this one they like this much more than that one. I mean, it would take quite a while to go through the details of it, but the essence of it is that it's quite fascinating of just how accurate it is, how closely you can get to understand what people's uh, particular likes and dislikes are, and what they're willing to buy and pay more for. And we did this for the phones a lot, and make decisions on your product for it. A very simple one is: would you rather have a phone that can charge real quickly, or would you rather have a great big battery? And that, just little things like that.
sure, sure. So, you now have a son who's graduated, just entering the workforce. Maybe what would be you say maybe your biggest challenge, or one of your biggest one challenge that you overcame, or some advice that you would talk to someone that hasn't retired young but maybe would like to?
Oh well, yeah. It's a lot of advice. I think the advice that I give people coming out of college is one: you need to focus intensely for probably 3 years if you want to become maybe as this subject matter expert. So that's one bit of advice. But the best advice I can give is that think about where you want to be your 3 years from today and start working on it today. You don't wait until you want to make a change and say, well, I need to make a change, but you haven't prepared for it. And it's gonna be a 2 to 3 years to prepare for that properly. So you have to look at where you want to be based on what's happening and where the trends are in the market. I advise them to periodically, I'd say maybe once a month or once every 2 months, do a job search and find out what companies are wanting and what kind of movement in that. And I think that every year you should pick an area and take a class in it or learn it. Try to either expand your expertise in one area or add another area every year of your career. Every year. Not every other year, not get this done for 2 years and then you take a break. It's every year you need to be growing your career. I'm telling you, because right behind you is another graduating class, and they're at the bleeding edge. The professors are learning all of the teaching too. So everybody, if you want to be competitive, to keep your career moving and have a dynamic career, then you need to manage it. You need to look at where you want to go in the future. How do you want to grow that?
Really good, good information. So why don't we wrap up? Tell me, because I just think it's a very interesting story. I love our country, how it was founded, and how people build it and continue to build it. But you have a relative that was should be famous, that maybe is famous in a sense. Do you want to give a brief 1 minute or couple minute on that?
Which, I mean, we may be talking about my grandmother's side. They came over here many years ago.
I'm talking about the surveyor, the explorers. Didn't you have an explorer in the family?
I mean, my grandmother's side came over here sight unseen on a boat.
Okay.
From Devonshire. I mean, they came to Texas. Somebody went over there and recruited them. Say, hey, we're looking for people to come to Texas. At a time when there wasn't really much here, and so they got on a boat. And his wife wasn't terribly strong, and he had 8 kids. And then they landed somewhere, New Orleans, and then they got on the river boat and made their way to Shreveport, and then got on a wagon and made their way to Carrollton. And they got some land on a land grant, and others they just paid 50 cents an acre for it. They never even seen the land.
That's the story I was thinking of. Yeah, it's
and they got, there's a book, you can find it in most of the special collections. It's the 60 Years in Texas, which one of my relatives of Henry Jackson wrote about their life and times. And I mean, this is back when there were still Indian raids, and the Comanches roamed the Great Plains, and they hadn't got rid of all of them, so they would keep coming in and have raids. But I just wonder, a lot reading the book, at how tough life was back then relative to how we live today. But they made it, and they survived, and they have all of the rest of us, of their kids and grandkids and great grandkids that prospered. But the story was an interesting story to me. It's a pretty big book to read through. But yeah, that's my
just the thought
grandmother's family.
just the thought of riding on a wagon, bouncing through the heat, the
Yeah,
cold,
yeah.
I mean, you hop in
Uh,
the car or whatever transportation with the heat and the air conditioning and comfortable seats and
yeah, I think
suspension.
it's probably not. If you think back then, it's like 18. Let's call it 1860 or just before the the wagons probably weren't very comfortable, and there weren't any roads, so there were paths that were where other wagons had been before and horse drawn. So yeah, I can imagine that that was quite a an experience for them to start in Devonshire, England, and just have the desire to go somewhere and strike out on their own. Uh, with all of his kids and his wife, and yeah, those it's quite it's an interesting story.
I'll say. Well, you have an interesting life, and of course, a lot more to come. And we may want to do a follow-up show if you're
Oh,
available
sure,
for that.
anytime. Yeah,
And,
there's lots of discuss, lots of advice I would give people. But yeah, anytime.
well, thank you so much for coming on, my friend, and you have a great day, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, bye
All
bye.
right. Bye bye.